few emotions are as vividly colored in the imagination as jealousy and envy. These so-called green-eyed feelings have haunted humanity for centuries, woven into ancient myths and whispered through cautionary tales in every culture. Yet, despite their notoriety and their frequent appearance in our daily lives, the distinction between jealousy and envy remains confusing. Are they truly different, or simply two sides of the same emotional coin? To answer this, we must first explore what science and psychology have discovered about these powerful experiences. When people talk about envy and jealousy, they often use the words interchangeably, but psychologists draw a clear line between them. Envy, at its core, arises when we want something that someone else possesses. It is a two-person emotion. One person desires what another has, whether it is a talent, a possession, or a circumstance. Jealousy, on the other hand, is rooted in the fear of losing something we already value, often a relationship, to someone else. This is a three-person emotion, involving not just the self and another, but a rival who threatens to take away something precious. The difference may seem subtle at first, but it shapes how these emotions are experienced and the situations that provoke them. Envy is often accompanied by feelings of inferiority, longing, and resentment. When we envy, we compare ourselves to another and feel we come up short. This comparison can stir dissatisfaction with our own circumstances and, at times, a sense of injustice. Jealousy, while closely related, is colored by anxiety, suspicion, and insecurity, as well as anger and distrust. The jealous person is not simply yearning for what another possesses. They are worried that what is theirs, be it a partner's affection, a friend's loyalty, or a coveted position, is at risk of being taken away. So, while envy looks outward with longing, jealousy looks inward with fear. It is easy and common to misunderstand these nuances. Everyday language often blurs the line, and many people conflate the two emotions, leading to misconceptions about their nature and significance. Some might even argue that one is worse than the other. However, empirical research suggests both are normal, healthy parts of human emotional life. While envy may sting more sharply, sometimes provoking shame or bitterness, jealousy is generally considered the milder of the two. Both, however, serve essential psychological functions, acting as mirrors for our self-worth and values. The roots of envy and jealousy stretch deep into our evolutionary past. From the perspective of evolutionary psychology, these emotions are not arbitrary quirks of the mind, but products of our species' long history of social living. They are, in a sense, built into our genetic scaffolding. The logic is straightforward. In the ancestral environment, resources and relationships were often limited, and competition for them was fierce. Envy, triggered by the awareness that someone else has an advantage, may have spurred our ancestors to strive for more, to improve their standing, or to acquire what was needed for survival. Jealousy, by contrast, may have evolved to help us guard what we already had, alerting us to threats to valued relationships or possessions. Consider, for example, the paradoxes of social comparison. Why do we so often envy our neighbor's new car, but rarely feel the same pang when we read about a billionaire's latest yacht? Research suggests that our emotions are most strongly triggered by those who are similar to us, peers or rivals in our immediate social circle, rather than by distant figures whose lives seem unattainable. This sensitivity to local comparison likely served an adaptive purpose. By keeping track of the successes and failures of those around us, our ancestors could gauge their own status and chances for success, adapting their behavior to the shifting dynamics of the group. Jealousy, too, has its evolutionary logic. The fear of losing a partner's affection or a position of favor could prompt protective behaviors, sometimes subtle, sometimes dramatic, that help maintain important social bonds. Foundational psychological theories view jealousy as a universal human emotion, one that appears in myths and literature across cultures and eras. These stories, ancient and modern, reflect not only the pain jealousy can cause, but also the self-knowledge it can bring. To feel jealous is, in a way, to recognize what we value most. But if envy and jealousy are universal, does that mean they are unavoidable and perhaps even necessary? Evidence suggests that not only are these emotions normal, but they play a vital role in our social awareness. Both envy and jealousy provide us with information about our relationships and social standing. Rather than being purely destructive, they can highlight what matters to us and reveal the contours of our desires and fears. In fact, some psychologists argue that trying to suppress these emotions entirely can be harmful, cutting us off from important aspects of ourselves. Envy, for example, is often linked to dissatisfaction, but this very dissatisfaction can be adaptive. It can motivate us to pursue new goals, to work harder, or to change our circumstances. In this sense, envy is not simply a poison, but a signal, a prompt to action. Jealousy, for its part, can serve as an early warning system, alerting us to threats to valued relationships or positions. These feelings, uncomfortable as they may be, push us to pay closer attention to our social world and to the people in it. Of course, envy is not always the same. Some researchers distinguish between benign envy, which inspires us to improve ourselves, and malicious envy, which can lead to resentment or even sabotage. Similarly, jealousy can range from fleeting insecurity to deep-seated suspicion and anger. The intensity and expression of these emotions are shaped by our personalities, our histories, and the specific social context. Self-esteem plays a crucial role too. Those with fragile self-worth may be more prone to feeling both envy and jealousy and may struggle more with their effects. Throughout history, envy and jealousy have been viewed with suspicion. Ancient myths and religious texts are filled with cautionary tales warning of their dangers. Envy, in particular, is often portrayed as covetous, a desire to possess what is not rightfully ours, while jealousy is seen as possessive, a fear of losing what we already have. These themes have echoed through the centuries, shaping cultural attitudes toward these emotions. Yet, despite their bad reputation, science now sees them as essential, adaptive parts of our inner lives. One of the most practical reasons for distinguishing between jealousy and envy is that each calls for a different kind of response. When we feel envy, we might benefit from reflecting on our own goals and values, or from finding healthier ways to compare ourselves to others. When we feel jealousy, it may be time to attend to the relationships and attachments that matter most, and to communicate openly about our fears. Understanding the difference is not just an academic exercise, it is a step toward emotional health and self-awareness. In the end, jealousy and envy are not signs of moral failure, but markers of what it means to be human. They remind us that we are social creatures, shaped by competition and cooperation, by longing and by loyalty. They reflect our hopes, our insecurities, and the bonds that tie us to others. By unveiling these green-eyed emotions, by understanding them for what they are, we begin to see ourselves more clearly and to approach our desires and fears with greater wisdom. To truly understand jealousy and envy, we must look beneath their emotional surface, exploring the intricate mechanisms of the mind and body that create, sustain, and sometimes amplify these powerful feelings. Science, with its ever-sharpening lens, has begun to reveal the neural choreography and physiological signatures that accompany jealousy and envy, offering new insight into just how deeply these emotions are wired into our being. A glimpse inside the brain, illuminated by modern neuroimaging, reveals that jealousy and envy are not mere social quirks but are deeply rooted in distinct neural architectures. Meta-analyses of brain imaging studies have mapped out the circuits engaged when people experience various forms of envy, from the sharp pangs of social comparison to the more complex tangle of love-related envy. These studies show that different shades of envy, whether fleeting, personality-driven, or entwined with matters of the heart, activate unique but overlapping regions in the brain. For example, the left dorsolateral prefrontal cortex and the superior temporal gyrus have emerged as important players, particularly in those predisposed to envy. The volume of gray matter in these areas appears to correlate with how prone a person is to envy, suggesting that our very brain structure can shape our emotional tendencies. Yet, brain structure alone does not determine our fate. Emotional intelligence, the capacity to recognize and regulate feelings in ourselves and others, seems to mediate the relationship between these neural features and the experience of envy. Individuals with higher emotional intelligence may have the neurological resources to manage rather than be overwhelmed by envious impulses, redirecting them toward healthier ends or blunting their sting altogether. Jealousy, too, is etched into the folds of the brain, though its neural signature is subtly distinct. Case studies and neural imaging findings point to a central role for the right hemisphere in jealousy, especially in cases of delusional jealousy, where suspicion and fear reach pathological intensity. The left part of the cerebral cortex is also implicated, as seen in people who have suffered brain injuries or strokes. Disruptions in this region often coincide with changes in jealous behavior, sometimes muting it, other times unleashing it. These findings suggest a delicate neural balance, a network that, when in harmony, keeps jealousy in check, but when disturbed, can give rise to obsession and distress. The orchestration of jealousy is not the work of a single brain region, but the result of a coordinated ensemble. The amygdala, the brain's sentinel for threat and emotional salience, lights up in moments of jealousy, signaling the presence of a rival or the risk of loss. The anterior cingulate cortex, involved in the experience of social pain and conflict monitoring, and the insula, which processes internal bodily states and visceral feelings, also join this neural chorus. Such activation patterns are not random. They are intertwined with survival circuitry, reflecting jealousy's ancient roots as a guardian of social bonds and resources. When jealousy becomes entwined with romantic attachment, both the stakes and the brain's response intensify. Functional magnetic resonance imaging studies show that romantic jealousy activates the basal ganglia, a cluster of structures associated with motivation and reward, as well as emotional and behavioral responses, including aggression. The intensity of jealousy in romantic contexts is linked to both emotional highs and lows. It can be heightened by romantic happiness, but also carries a risk of fueling aggression, especially when the attachment feels threatened. The neurobiology of jealousy and envy is further shaped by the ebb and flow of brain chemicals. Dopamine, often called the reward neurotransmitter, plays a central role, especially in pathological jealousy, where its dysregulation can drive compulsive, even delusional thoughts and behaviors. Serotonin, the chemical often associated with mood regulation, is also involved. Imbalances can leave individuals more vulnerable to the destabilizing effects of jealousy. Oxytocin, sometimes dubbed the bonding hormone, exerts a counterbalancing influence. Experimental studies suggest that administering oxytocin via nasal spray can reduce the intensity of romantic jealousy, hinting at possible therapeutic avenues for those whose jealousy becomes overwhelming. The body, too, is drawn into the drama of these emotions. Episodes of jealousy have measurable endocrine and physiological effects. Cortisol, the body's stress hormone, surges, preparing the individual for action or confrontation. Heart rate and blood pressure climb, mirroring the anxiety and vigilance that jealousy so often evokes. These physiological changes are not merely byproducts. They reinforce the emotional experience, amplifying the sense of urgency or threat, and can even shape behaviors such as territorial defense. But what of envy? The brain's response to envy is nuanced and can depend on its flavor, benign or malicious. Lesion studies offer a window into this complexity. Neurodegenerative diseases that damage certain regions of the brain can impair a person's sense of fairness or deservingness, distorting their experience of envy and even affecting the pleasure taken in another's misfortune, a phenomenon known as schadenfreude. These findings underscore that envy is not a monolith. It is colored by our sense of justice, morality, and the intricate wiring of our brains. Cognition weaves another vital thread through the tapestry of jealousy and envy. Psychological research has uncovered a host of cognitive distortions that can fan the flames of jealousy. People prone to jealousy often engage in social comparison, mind reading, assuming they know what others are thinking, catastrophizing, imagining the worst possible outcomes, and all or nothing thinking, seeing situations in black and white. These mental habits do not merely reflect the emotion, they can intensify it, leading to behaviors such as surveillance, confrontation, or withdrawal. Envy, too, is shaped by cognition, particularly in the dual forms it can take. Benign envy may spur self-improvement, while malicious envy can lead to negative behaviors. Self-control acts as a crucial moderator of these outcomes. Those with stronger self-control are better able to channel envy constructively, resisting the urge to undermine or disparage others. Evolutionary and cognitive behavioral models help explain why jealousy and envy are so persistent and complex. These theories suggest that the triggers for jealousy and envy are not arbitrary but tied to deep-seated concerns about attachment and competition for resources. Sex differences in what provokes jealousy, for example, may reflect different evolutionary pressures. Cognitive behavioral models further emphasize that early experiences and learned beliefs shape how these emotions are felt and expressed. For some, past trauma, self-judgment, or an ingrained habit of comparison can set the stage for chronic jealousy or envy. Therapeutic approaches have begun to harness these scientific insights. Emotional schema therapy, a form of cognitive behavioral treatment, focuses on untangling the social and cognitive mechanisms at play in jealousy. By identifying and challenging distorted thinking patterns, individuals can learn to respond more adaptively, reducing the grip of jealousy on their lives. The role of emotional intelligence emerges again as a critical buffer. People with higher emotional intelligence are not only more adept at recognizing jealousy and envy in themselves, but are also better equipped to manage these emotions and respond constructively. This capacity extends to mate retention tactics, strategies employed to maintain valued relationships in the face of perceived threats, enabling more thoughtful, less reactive behavior. Self-control, both as a trait and in the heat of the moment, further shapes how jealousy and envy unfold. Studies have found that the ability to regulate impulses and emotions can make the difference between a fleeting pang of envy and a destructive spiral of resentment or aggression. Notably, there are sex differences in the response to infidelity and jealousy, suggesting that social and biological factors interact in complex ways. As we unravel the anatomy of jealousy and envy, it becomes clear that these emotions are not mere failings of character, but sophisticated products of our biology and psychology. They are shaped by the architecture and chemistry of the brain, the rhythms of the body, the patterns of our thoughts, and the wisdom or folly of our emotional habits. Understanding their mechanisms is not just an academic exercise, it opens the door to greater self-awareness and, perhaps, a more compassionate response to these most human of emotions. Jealousy and envy are not just private storms brewing in the mind, they cast shadows that stretch across the intricate web of our social lives. These emotions, so often treated as shameful secrets, actually play a powerful role in shaping all kinds of relationships, between friends, lovers, colleagues, and even strangers glimpsed through the filtered lens of social media. The science of jealousy and envy reveals that the ways we experience, express, and manage these feelings are deeply intertwined with the rules and rituals of our cultures, the dynamics of our closest circles, and the expectations society quietly weaves around us. In romantic relationships, jealousy has long been portrayed as either a villain or a sign of passion, but research is beginning to unravel the myths that surround it. Contrary to the old belief that jealousy is a mark of deep love or an unavoidable part of intimacy, contemporary studies highlight the importance of healthy boundaries, trust, and open communication. When jealousy arises, it often signals a need for deeper conversation about what each partner values and fears. However, jealousy can also inspire controlling or possessive behaviors, as individuals try to manage the discomfort of potential loss. These actions can range from subtle checks on a partner's whereabouts to overt attempts to limit their freedom, creating an atmosphere thick with tension. The impact of jealousy in a partnership is rarely fleeting. When left unaddressed, it can breed resentment and insecurity, altering the very fabric of a relationship. Neuroscientific and behavioral studies have mapped how romantic jealousy unfolds over time, showing that it can flare up quickly in response to threats, real or imagined, and linger as suspicion or even aggression. This emotional turbulence is often intensified by the closeness of the relationship. The more intimate the connection, the more vulnerable each person may be to jealousy, especially when a third party is perceived as a threat. The emotional response is rarely proportional to the actual risk, but is shaped by the intensity of attachment and the fear of loss. Not all jealousy is the same. Researchers have identified several types, such as reactive jealousy, triggered by an actual event, anxious jealousy, marked by persistent worry, and possessive jealousy, driven by a need to control. Each type is linked to different relationship outcomes and personality traits. For instance, anxious jealousy often correlates with higher neuroticism and lower relationship satisfaction, while reactive jealousy may prompt honest communication about boundaries and needs. Even the friends a romantic partner keeps can become a source of jealousy, especially if those friends are seen as rivals or threats to the specialness of the relationship. Interestingly, jealousy is not solely destructive. Some studies suggest that, in moderation, it can encourage partners to appreciate one another more deeply or to renegotiate neglected aspects of their bond. Yet, when jealousy turns into avoidance or constant suspicion, it can erode trust and intimacy. The line between healthy vigilance and unhealthy obsession is thin, and couples who navigate jealousy successfully tend to do so through dialogue, empathy, and a willingness to confront insecurities together. Outside of romance, jealousy and envy take on different forms among friends. While people might expect to feel envious of acquaintances or distant figures, research shows that jealousy is often most acute when it comes to close friends, especially when those friends enjoy extraordinary experiences, achievements, or recognition. The closeness of the relationship amplifies the emotional sting, making the successes of friends feel more personal and sometimes turning admiration into discomfort or rivalry. In these moments, jealousy can test the resilience of friendships, prompting either deeper connection through honest conversation or quiet withdrawal fueled by insecurity. Envy in friendships and social groups often involves a delicate balance. On one hand, seeing a friend succeed can spark motivation, nudging us to pursue our own goals. On the other, envy can lead to destructive behavior, such as downplaying a friend's accomplishments or undermining their happiness. The experience of envy is not uniform. It can shift between benign forms that inspire growth and malicious forms that corrode goodwill. The nature of the relationship, the perceived fairness of the situation, and the personalities involved all play roles in determining the outcome. Workplace dynamics provide another fertile ground for the study of envy and jealousy. Here, envy typically arises from competition, performance evaluations, and the constant comparison of achievements, status, and rewards. Envy can have paradoxical effects at work. On the negative side, it may lead to sabotage, reduced cooperation, or even efforts to undermine colleagues. Yet, evidence also suggests that envy can boost motivation, encouraging employees to work harder or improve their skills. Some forms of envy have been linked to greater job engagement and even pro-social behaviors, such as collaboration or mentorship, especially when the workplace culture supports healthy competition and transparent recognition. The role of leadership in these dynamics is crucial. Effective leaders can manage envy by recognizing its dual nature and adopting strategies that channel it constructively. This might involve fostering a sense of fairness, providing opportunities for individual growth, and modeling appreciation for team members' achievements. A dual-track model suggests that leaders must address both the emotional and structural roots of envy, balancing empathy with clear communication about expectations and rewards. Jealousy in the workplace is less discussed but no less significant. It often stems from insecurity and a sense of competition, whether over recognition, promotions, or the favor of influential colleagues. When jealousy festers, it can lead to office gossip, exclusion, or passive-aggressive behaviors that undermine team cohesion. Yet some theorists argue that reframing jealousy by recognizing it as a signal of what is valued or threatened can lead to improved productivity and more honest, supportive work environments. Not all envy is created equal. Researchers distinguish between benign envy, which can spur self-improvement, and malicious envy, which is more likely to give rise to hostile feelings and harmful actions. Cross-cultural studies reveal that the balance between these two forms is shaped by societal norms and values. For example, some cultures encourage open acknowledgement of envy and provide rituals or language to diffuse its power, while others treat it as a taboo emotion, leading to denial or suppression. The intensity and conceptualization of both envy and jealousy are deeply influenced by cultural narratives, gender expectations, and even language itself. Across societies, attitudes toward infidelity and jealousy differ markedly, often reflecting underlying beliefs about parental investment, property, and the proper roles of men and women. Research consistently finds that men, on average, report greater upset over sexual infidelity, while societal norms may dictate what is considered an acceptable expression of jealousy. These attitudes are not static but evolve alongside shifting cultural values, media portrayals, and legal frameworks. Social comparison is a powerful engine for both envy and scorn, especially in environments that are highly stratified or competitive. Status and power dynamics shape not only who we envy, but also how we respond to those feelings. In the age of social media, the opportunities for comparison and thus for envy are virtually limitless. Seeing curated versions of others' lives can erode well-being, as individuals measure themselves against idealized images and narratives. This phenomenon is not limited to the young or the digitally immersed. It reflects a broader social dynamic in which comparison is both a source of aspiration and a seedbed for dissatisfaction. Socioeconomic status also plays a role, with research suggesting that social class can mediate the relationship between subjective well-being and envy. People tend to compare themselves to those in similar social positions, and these comparisons can either reinforce satisfaction or fuel longing and resentment. The ways in which envy is expressed, acknowledged, or managed are often dictated by social context, with different cultures, languages, and even subcultures developing their own norms and coping mechanisms. Far from being merely private emotions, jealousy and envy are woven into the very fabric of social life. They reveal what we value, what we fear losing, and how we measure ourselves against others. While their shadows can darken relationships and workplaces, they can also illuminate paths to greater understanding of ourselves, our values, and the unseen rules that govern our interactions. In every culture and every context, these emotions are both a challenge and an invitation to reflect, to communicate, and, at times, to transform. When jealousy or envy stirs within us, the sensations can be overwhelming. A rush of heat, a tightening in the chest, a cascade of thoughts that spiral out of control. Yet science has begun to map not only why we feel these emotions, but, more importantly, how we might navigate their stormy waters in ways that foster resilience and growth rather than regret or destruction. Experimental studies show that jealousy, in particular, can spark what researchers call compensatory behaviors. When faced with a perceived threat to a close relationship, people are often motivated to engage in mate retention strategies, actions aimed at reinforcing bonds and warding off rivals. This observation aligns with long-standing evolutionary theories, suggesting jealousy is not simply an affliction but a deeply rooted mechanism designed to protect valued social ties. While these impulses can sometimes lead to controlling or possessive actions, the underlying energy is not inherently negative. Recognizing this, therapists and counselors often encourage individuals to become curious about what jealousy is trying to signal, rather than simply suppressing or ignoring it. Curiosity is the first step toward transforming jealousy and envy into opportunities for self-discovery. Mindfulness and reflective practices, as recent research suggests, play a pivotal role here. When we pause to notice the physical sensations and thoughts that accompany jealousy or envy, we create space between ourselves and our reactions. This mindful awareness helps us see that these emotions are often rooted in deeper fears, perhaps of inadequacy, loss, or not being enough. By shining a gentle light on these fears, we can approach them with compassion rather than self-criticism, reducing their power to drive impulsive or harmful behavior. Of course, insight alone is not always enough. Practical advice for managing jealousy emphasizes understanding its origins, tracing the threads back to past experiences, insecurities, or unmet needs. By identifying the situations or relationships that most commonly trigger these emotions, individuals can begin to anticipate their arrival and prepare coping strategies in advance. For example, someone who notices jealousy flaring up when a partner spends time with others might ask what underlying beliefs or past hurts are being activated. This process of self-examination, while sometimes uncomfortable, can prevent jealousy from spiraling into accusations or conflict. Once the roots are recognized, evidence points to three general coping mechanisms people use when dealing with envy and jealousy: self-reliance, self-bolstering, and selective ignoring. Self-reliance involves drawing on one's own inner resources to weather the emotional storm, reminding oneself of personal strengths and values. Self-bolstering goes a step further, as individuals actively seek out experiences or thoughts that reinforce their self-worth, recalling achievements, nurturing supportive friendships, or engaging in activities that foster pride. Selective ignoring, meanwhile, is the conscious decision to turn away from triggering situations or comparisons, at least temporarily. While none of these strategies is a cure-all, each offers a way to regain equilibrium without denying the emotional reality. Interestingly, not all envy needs to be suppressed or shunned. Scholars argue that envy is not inherently bad; it can be reframed and harnessed as a powerful source of self-knowledge and motivation. When we recognize that someone else's success or happiness stirs envy within us, it is often a clue about our own aspirations or unmet desires. Instead of allowing envy to fester as bitterness or resentment, we can use it as a mirror, asking what it reveals about our hopes and values. This reframing can transform envy from a corrosive force into a catalyst for personal growth. For instance, envying a colleague's promotion might prompt honest reflection about our own career goals and inspire new steps toward advancement or skill building. Cognitive reframing is one of the most effective tools in this process. By deliberately shifting the narrative around jealousy and envy from "I am lacking" or "I am threatened" to "I am learning" or "I am motivated," we can change the emotional impact. This does not mean pretending not to care or minimizing real feelings. Rather, it is about acknowledging the emotion, questioning its underlying assumptions, and choosing a more constructive interpretation. Over time, this practice strengthens emotional resilience, allowing us to face future challenges with greater confidence and less reactivity. Emotional regulation techniques also play a crucial role. Mindfulness, as mentioned earlier, helps create a pause between feeling and action, giving us room to choose our response. Other approaches include breathwork, journaling, or speaking with a trusted friend or therapist about our feelings. These practices can diffuse the intensity of the emotion, making it easier to respond thoughtfully rather than react impulsively. Setting clear intentions for how we want to handle jealousy or envy, reminding ourselves of our commitment to growth, understanding, or kindness can anchor us when the emotional tide rises. Within relationships, jealousy can be particularly fraught, but evidence suggests that, when approached with openness and self-awareness, it can actually become an invitation to greater intimacy and trust. Addressing jealousy head-on by naming it, exploring its causes, and communicating vulnerably can strengthen the bonds between partners, friends, or colleagues. This process often involves building new habits of trust, expressing needs directly, and working together to create a sense of security. The goal is not to eradicate jealousy altogether, but to use it as a signal for honest dialogue and mutual understanding. Therapists working with couples or individuals sometimes encourage the use of structured communication exercises where each person can express their fears and hopes without interruption or judgment. These conversations, while challenging, often reveal shared values and vulnerabilities, deepening the sense of connection. Over time, this willingness to confront difficult emotions together can transform jealousy from a divisive force into a foundation for growth. It is important to acknowledge that coping strategies are not one size fits all. What works for one person or relationship may not suit another. Some may find that self-reliance and selective ignoring are most effective, while others benefit from open dialogue or professional support. The process of experimenting with different approaches and reflecting on their impact is itself a form of growth, fostering greater self-awareness and emotional agility. The journey from raw jealousy or envy to positive transformation is rarely linear. There will be setbacks, moments of confusion, or times when old patterns resurface. Yet research underscores the remarkable potential for these emotions, when mindfully engaged, to catalyze resilience and healthier relationships. Each episode of jealousy or envy becomes an opportunity to practice new skills, reinforce self-worth, and clarify what truly matters. In the end, perhaps the most hopeful message that science offers is this: jealousy and envy are not flaws to be eradicated, but guides to be understood. When we learn to navigate their storms with compassion, self-awareness, and evidence-based strategies, they can lead us not just back to calm waters, but to deeper insight, stronger connections, and a more authentic sense of self.